Good afternoon. Welcome to the 93rd Annual Convention of FICCI. Tomorrow morning, Honorable Prime Minister of India will inaugurate the FICCI AGM and the FICCI Annual Expo at 11 a.m. Today, we begin with the curtain raiser of the 93rd AGM on the theme Inspired India, with a keynote address by Shri N.K. Singh, Chairman, Finance Commission of India, on Indian economy and reinforcing federal trust, followed by a panel discussion with secretaries to the Government of India. The theme of the annual convention has been influenced by the current circumstances of the world scenario. India has many inherent strengths, from the vibrancy of our industry to the strength of our leadership, our educated and hardworking middle class, and our high potential youth. Together, we can ensure that India reaches its rightful place in the world and emerges as a strong economy and an enlightened nation. This is our Inspired India, the theme of our annual convention. I now President FICCI for the introduction and welcome remarks.
Dear members, past presidents of FICCI, member associations, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It is my honor and privilege as the president of FICCI to extend a very warm welcome to all of you at our 93rd annual convention themed Inspired India. Some events in history are so big and impactful that they divide the world to a before and after. The coronavirus has cut its trench through time, and in the years to come, 2020 will be remembered as the COVID year. Like the rest of the world, India too had to innovate, re-strategize, and build new skills with a renewed focus on health and humanity. More significantly, it had to extensively ramp up its healthcare capabilities. And in the very same breath, the existential necessity of business and the economy was highlighted 100 times over. But despite the disruptions to life and work, we are thankfully on the path of recovery from this crisis. At FICCI, we handled this unforeseen challenge to the best of our ability. Our primary source of revenue was completely disrupted. The challenge ahead was how could we even cover our fixed expenses, including salaries, across FICCI's pan-India presence, and then continue to serve our members in these trying times. The survival, there was an urgent need to reimagine, reinvent, and reboot. With the help and the support of the Presidium of FICCI, with members and the Secretariat, we embraced and adapted to the new normal by becoming much more proactive and multidimensional in our response. We went digital, ensuring widespread access and reach to the multitude of initiatives being undertaken, starting with our COVID response, and then our recommendations for a revival package and the ongoing discussions for stimulus. We took the lead in representing the industry. Innumerable webinars and virtual conference meetings were held, both with the center and state governments and industry leaders, to bring in the much needed support and incentives required to keep the economy going. It's extremely gratifying to note that several of the recommendations made by FICCI have been implemented or are in the process of being implemented, the details of which I will be sharing with you in my subsequent address. The Government of India's timely decision and very important measures in all spheres has ensured the safety and the well-being of citizens, but has also enabled economic activity to resume. The rollout of the 20 lakh crore fiscal stimulus by the government, which is almost 15% of India's GDP, and the 5 tranches of the stimulus package unveiled by the Finance Minister, Srimati Nirmala Sitharaman, are now showing results on the economy. Among the many initiatives taken, Atmanirbhar Bharat is significant. As we have seen a smart recovery in Q2 with a consumption of 9%, the global predictions that India's growth next year will be upwards of 9%. We are indeed on the path of very significant recovery. In most of the sectors, except for hospitality and aviation, large businesses are showing significant recovery, ranging from 70 to almost at 110% of last year's activity, and are showing boosted EBITDAs, albeit on the back of significant cost-cutting measures. The MSME sector is also beginning to show signs of recovery. However, there is still pain in the market, and we need fiscal stimulus now more than ever before. And we will continue to press forward for this for the sake of industry. Moving forward, the theme of our annual convention is Inspired India. This Inspired India is a reflection of our many inherent strengths, from the vibrancy of our industry to the strength of our leadership, our educated and hardworking middle class, and our high potential youth. The possibilities of science and of putting all this together, I believe that we can ensure India reaches its rightful place as a strong economy and an enlightened nation. This indeed is our Inspired India and is for all of us to work together to make it happen. FICCI's annual convention has always been one of the most awaited congregations of leadership from government and industry who come together to cross-fertilize ideas and to discuss and explore what more we can do. This year, our sessions will ideate on several pertinent topics, such as the trends in AI and its future possibilities, the need for capital to fund a $5 trillion economy, reimagining healthcare in a post-COVID world, and most importantly, the track to hastening the vaccination and its delivery, implementation of Industry 4.0, Atmanirbhar Bharat, and many, many others. And as the country steers towards a new era of digitalization, which sectors will continue to be the building blocks of a new India, and which will be the new emerging sectors? This and more as we collectively architect the new and inspired India. I'm happy to announce this year we're also inaugurating the first ever FICCI Annual Expo 2020, a year-long, one-of-its-kind virtual event inspired by the need for Indian business to stay connected and to forge new business alliances. It is facilitated by FICCI's own fully secure virtual event platform, HIKE, a global facility for business, information, knowledge, and education. It is also a symbol of our innovation and resurgence. We will be sharing more information on the FICCI Annual Expo tomorrow because, as you all know, the Honorable Prime Minister is doing us the privilege of launching this expo. It is my privilege to welcome now, and through the course of the next 3 days, luminaries of distinguished speakers and eminent global leaders who will be sharing with us their vision on an inspired India and their view of the path forward. Thank you all. I'm grateful to each one of you for everything you have done for us over the past year and for your friendship and your presence here today. And as I conclude, I'd like to share my belief. The secret of change is to focus all your energies not on fighting the old, but on building the new. Let us move forward to create a brave new future. As the world works frenetically and plans to build back, let us all ensure that India builds forward. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your support and for the opportunity to have served FICCI. As I end this welcome address, I'm privileged to move on to our very first session and have also the privilege of introducing a speaker who will truly set the stage for this conference, Mr. N.K. Singh, the Chairman of the Finance Commission of India. Much of the significant planning for the revival of the Indian economy is dependent on the execution. And at the crux of execution lies the balance between the center, the state, and the budget. Who better than the Chairman of the Finance Commission to help us understand this? Mr. N.K. Singh has a critical role to play in the distribution of proceeds from the central tax pool to the state. And as we know, so much of the broad vision of the country, which has to be felt out through multiple initiatives, is a matter of state and center balance. It is estimated that the role of the states is almost 60% compared to the role of the center, which is 40% in many of the Member of Parliament as an author, an economist, and a humanitarian. It is with great pleasure that I welcome Sri N.K. Singh to give the opening address at Inspire India and to speak on the Indian economy and reinforcing federal trust. Namaste and Jai Hind. Mr. N.K. Singh, sir, the floor is yours. Good evening and thank you. Will you please unmute your mic?
Am I unmuted? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Sangeeta. Thank you for your very warm words of welcome. It is indeed a privilege and honor for me to participate at this annual FICCI event, particularly under your very distinguished chairmanship, a period which has seen tumultuous changes, a period in which your leadership has remained unswerving and fully resolved to address some of the important challenges which will shape India's destiny in the future. So my congratulations for what you have done and my good wishes to FICCI on this very important occasion.
Thank you very much. It's an honor.
You have asked me to speak to you on the broad theme of reinforcing federal trust. Human society is embedded in trust. It was Albert Einstein who said, "Every kind of peaceful cooperation among men is primarily based on mutual trust." The Indian Constitution is also based on societal trust, which delineates the overall government rubric. The principal architecture of federal trust is embedded in the delineation of the government structure as contained in the 7th schedule of our Constitution. The evolution of fiscal federalism in India primarily dates back to the Government of India Act of 1919 and 1935. The Act of 1919 provided for a separation of revenue between the centre and the states. Under the 1935 Act, legislative powers were distributed under 3 heads: the federal list, the provincial list, and the concurrent list. The Act made the revenues and finances of the provincial government distinct from those of the federal government, and it provided for the collection and retention of levies by the federal government, which spelt out the details of the financial resources and the grants in aid to provinces. The Government of India Act of 1935 thus established the basic structure of fiscal federalism in India. This survives even today. The first Finance Commission was constituted in 1951 under Article 280 of the Constitution to exactly undertake some of the functions, Sangeeta, which you mentioned, namely the distribution of the vertical resources between the Union and the states, and then its horizontal distribution among the states. Our economic progress, global interdependence, and seamless integration through technology have legitimately reopened many of these settled contours for further deliberation. Indeed, I am grateful that the FICCI today is concentrating some of its energy on this. Are the existing arrangements on center-state relations adequate? Is the trust complete? Are the functions on legislative, executive, and financial divisions meet the aspirations of India? A society which is changing rapidly as it becomes both domestically and internationally more integrated. Revisiting the contours of the basic architecture of a consultative dialogue, there are 6 key areas which I want to focus on very briefly. All these are designed to reinforce federal trust. First and foremost is revisiting the 7th schedule of the Constitution itself. The 7th schedule divided the subjects broadly into the Union, the state, and the concurrent list. The first reason, perhaps, was the constitution of the Planning Commission. Another reason is the shifting of resources like forest and education from the state to the concurrent list by the 42nd Amendment of the Constitution. There are other examples, like the Manrega, Employment Guarantee Scheme, the right of children. We thus need to revisit the 7th schedule of the Constitution in a more fundamental way. The Commission on Center-State Relations, headed by Justice M.M. Punchi in 2010 also recommended that we need to revisit some of these issues and their entries. Since 2010, there have been far-reaching changes both in terms of political stability, which we are fortunate to have, the onslaught of technology, the emerging new challenges of national priorities. We need to consider all these in earnest. I would therefore suggest, first and foremost, the constitution of a high-powered committee of domain experts. They must recognize the contemporary context of what I said of technology, global interdependence, and changes in our national priorities. These necessitate a revisit to the traditional classification of subjects embedded in the 7th schedule of the Constitution. These national priorities must encompass many new areas which we now confront, like education, like health, like electricity, like infrastructure, to mention a few. The high-powered committee of experts should consist not only of parliamentarians and legal luminaries, but equally of experts with domain knowledge, with economists, academia, policy makers, and others engaged in the implementation of national priorities. Second, we need to revisit the entire area of Article 282 of the Constitution. The legitimacy of all centrally sponsored schemes, most of which are in the domain of states, emanate from the use, or if I may say, misuse of Article 282 of the Constitution. Based on the internal exercise which we did in the Finance Commission, it appears that there are approximately 211 such schemes and sub-schemes under one form of umbrella of these others. Many of these are masked in one form or the other. Thus, the centrally sponsored schemes should be flexible enough to allow the states to adapt, innovate, and change. We need to have a far more credible policy for rationalization of both centrally sponsored schemes and central outlays. We need to constitute an empowered group of domain experts to submit their recommendations to the Finance Minister and to the Prime Minister on the modalities for further and deeper rationalization of these centrally sponsored schemes. After all, we cannot overlook the fact that the total public outlay on these centrally sponsored schemes are close to 6-7 lakh crores a year, of which perhaps 3.5 lakh crores comes from the central government alone, and the balance of it from the state government. A much deeper rationalization and synergy in these would be necessary. The third is the need for continuity on aligning the fiscal consolidation roadmap of the center and the states in a more harmonious symmetry. This is an arduous but an inescapable task. A differentiated debt path for the state, which recognizes the present constraints and the issues of debt legacy, must be handled with sagacity and with sensitivity. The union government has allowed flexibility in terms of the package which Sagita had read out, or the finance minister allowing the states to borrow 2 percentage points more than earlier based on certain performance criteria. We need to build on this. We need to have a flexible performance-based outcomes while determining fiscal and debt targets. A fiscal range, then a fiscal point based on expenditure outcomes may be the need of the hour. Fourth, as Finance Commission, we recognize we have an important role in reinforcing federal trust, and we need to really emphasize that the inclusiveness of our mandate and the sense of ensuring equity and efficiency in a harmonized way is the principal challenge of the Finance Commission, which we have sought to address. Equally, the Finance Commission needs to have an important role and synergy between the working of the GST Council and the Finance Commission. Both of them are constitutional bodies, and both are central to the management of the finances, both the Union and the states. The fifth is a need for another forum for ongoing consultations after the abolition of the Planning Commission. With the abolition of the Planning Commission, many economists and policy makers have argued about an institutional vacuum. While the National Development Council is performing an important role The states have pleaded for a credible institution acting as a link for a policy between the center and the states. The Niti Aayog has emerged as a credible think tank, and their work in the sphere of center-state relations needs recognition. However, the states are keen to have a different kind of policy-based consultative forum. This is an area which deserves further consideration of policymakers. Sixth is that we must be mindful of the need to nurture trust, not only between the Union and the states, but also with the third tier of government, namely the local governments. They play a very important role in human development in terms of health and educational outcomes, and are consistent with the broad spirit of our Constitution. While the Central Finance Commission plays an important role in recommending resources, the states must equally ensure timely constitution of the state finance commissions and tabling their report in the state legislatures. At the same time, the accountability measures need to be strengthened at the third tier of the government to ensure that the best outcomes from funds which are devolved to them can benefit the third tier of government. Local governments are now integral to our polity. Federalism is a philosophy which is highly desirable for a complex country like India. It must go beyond partnership, which are embedded wholly in fiduciary obligations. They must embrace issues of national priority, which transcend boundaries, because they are designed to address the basic tenets of growth, the growth multipliers, and benefit every segment of society. They also address welfare tenets on health, housing, employment, national priorities, the new education policy, the Ayushman Bharat, to mention a few of some major new initiatives which constitute an integral part of the changing nature of obligations between the center and the states. We must address the limitations of a written constitution while never forgetting that stability is an equal player. The ancient Greek philosopher Socrates once said that the secret of change is to focus all your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new. I do believe that if fresh initiatives are taken on some of the suggestions which I have briefly touched upon and I have made, it could impart new dynamism to fiscal federalism. Federalism may be flexible. Trust is not. It needs constant nurturing and constant rejuvenation. It is in this spirit that I thank the President and FICCI for this opportunity to share with them some thoughts on reinforcing federal trust. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Shri N.K. Singh. Nobody could have said it better. To combine the complexity of a subject like this, to encapsulate the complexity of a country like ours, where nothing is binary. It's a spectrum of opportunities. It's a wide variation of choices and options which happen at every count. And yet you encapsulated it so beautifully with the 5 relevant and important points. And then when that federalism is a philosophy. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for this great opening, which actually lifted the dialogue to another dimension. I truly appreciate it and commend you for everything you have done in the service of this nation. Thank you so much. Namaste.
Thank you.